Emmanuel, and welcome James. Both of you, welcome to Montreal, because you're both not from Montreal, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, welcome then to Langfest 2019. Maybe James, can you first of all present yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and everything?
Well, so I started with French in 7th grade at my school when I was only 12 years old. You know, it was a language requirement that I had to take a language. And then in the, December of that year, I decided to move on to Italian and started learning that because, you know, my grandmother was Italian and she would always cook some great food, so I was really inspired by her to learn the language, and she always loved it when, you know, I spoke the language. She didn't understand me when I spoke the language to other people, but it was really, you know, really lifted her heart. And a few years ago, I took up Spanish. I originally started learning on my own, you know, dabbling a little bit, but then I met some Cuban and Dominican friends, and I started practicing with them a lot. And then I soon transferred into a class for that. And then outside the classroom, I've been really active in trying to spread my my message and my story. I was the first ever student to present at the New York State Association of Foreign Language Teachers annual conference in 2017.
Impressive.
So, and that's probably something that I'm very proud of. But number one, my proudest accomplishment is going to be speaking here at Langfest 2019, for sure.
Perfect, all right. And Emmanuel,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself, your
Yeah.
background and your expertise.
All right, so I'm originally from France, from Paris. But during my studies, I had the chance to study abroad. So first in Germany, in Karlsruhe, then in England, in Southampton. Then I participated in an exchange program in Japan, so where I got to learn Japanese a little bit more in depth. And then I moved back to Germany, to Munich, to my PhD. So it's not a PhD in linguistics or in anything that has to do with languages, because my background, my background is engineering. So yeah, electrical, computer science engineering, and I did master's and PhD in telecommunications. But right now I'm into software engineering, so I'm a software engineer professionally. And I also happen to have a passion for languages, and I managed to combine my job and my passion to create a dictionary, so a digital dictionary for East Asian languages, so Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese, which are languages that share a lot of different vocabulary, so a lot of words, about up to 60–70% in some cases.
All right, so let's go a little bit more into the detail. Let's
Sure.
So basically, it's an online dictionary. Or
That is
it's
correct,
an
yes.
app or also website or both.
Both, yes.
Okay.
Both a website and an app.
The
Yeah.
idea is to connect what exactly with other languages?
All right. So the thing is, in East Asia, so historically China played a major role in the region. So you had a lot of vocabulary from Chinese that was imported into Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, etc. And these words can be written in Chinese characters, which is kind of the ancestral script of the area. And so they can be written the same way, but with time they basically developed a different pronunciation in each language. So my dictionary, and okay, there were also a lot of reforms in these languages that made it so that nowadays these words are not really written the same way anymore. And my dictionary makes it so that you can basically revert to the spelling it had in Chinese characters to see basically which are the words in common between these languages. And it's very useful for polyglots that are learning East Asian languages, because then they get to make mnemonic connections between
Alright, so now
East
tell
Asian
us,
languages.
What's the name of the app or the website?
It's called CJKV Dict.
All right.
So, right, and you can probably put a link in the description of the video later, I guess.
Yeah, as you know, a fellow language learner, I find that extremely helpful. You know, we don't, you know, my specialty is more in Romance languages.
Yeah.
So I can directly see, for example, prefixes and suffixes that come from Romance languages, and saying, oh, I know where this came from in English because it came from Spanish or French.
Yes.
So even though we don't have the characters in English, I could see how somebody maybe learning Chinese could just use that as almost like a springboard to learn all the other languages in the region.
That is a very good point. That's absolutely right, because it's a very good comparison actually between East Asian languages, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Romance languages, because like Chinese is a little bit like Latin in Europe, so all the common vocabulary that are found in Romance languages and even languages across Europe, even German and English have some loan words from Latin originally. Can be also traced back to the same root. So yeah, it's a similar concept. If you're familiar with Romance languages only, you can understand
So basically,
the similarities.
That means that we can also extend that avid and do it also for other families of languages?
Theoretically, it would be possible, but yeah, that would be a completely different area.
I could see a real use for, especially, you know, I'm thinking like the Middle East with like, for example, Arabic, and then it could be transferred into all of those languages. And I know somebody, I'm not sure who, is doing a presentation on African linguistics, so you could do all the language families there. So I could just see that, you know, initial starting point in East Asian languages just being expanded to help, you know, people learn even more languages than they already might speak.
That's correct.
What is interesting is that also both of you have experience with learning a language in schools or in a classroom and also independently, right?
Yes. That is correct.
Tell us about that.
Well, you know, I started with, as I previously, I started with my French class, and most people are really don't like the conjugation tables, and they think it's tedious doing that work over and over and over again. But the problem with the language classroom is that you don't get to use that. I was very fortunate and very lucky to find people that spoke French so that I would be able to communicate with them and you know, create emails with them. So I'd be putting what I learned into actual practice. And I think that's something that the language classroom lacks, and that's why so many people are turned off by it. And when I was doing that with my independent language learning, I was doing it on an even higher basis. But there were still some elements that I took from the language learning classroom and incorporate into my independent study program. And that's what my presentation is all about. Trying to find the similarities between the needs of independent and classroom language learners, and how to bring the classroom perspective and some of the advantages into the independent language study routine for some people.
Interesting. Emmanuel,
Yeah.
what is your experience? 'Cause it's the same for you.
Yeah, that's a very
Like both?
interesting. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think James made a very good point on the fact that classrooms can be a little bit frustrating or boring if the motivation is not there. And usually, a good way to find, I mean, to kind of increase the motivation of students is to give them an experience of practicing the language outside of the classroom. And I think what you did, so with like random French speakers or like friends that you from different countries that you might have met outside the classroom, probably was a big motivation boost for you, right?
Yes.
For me, yeah, I had similar experiences when I was learning German in high school. I took like I went on a summer trip to Germany, and I must say that after that my perspective kind of radically changed when it comes to language learning. I was a lot more motivated, and because it was between the equivalent of 10th and 11th grade. So in 10th grade I was not that motivated with German. My teacher wasn't that good, and after this experience in Germany, I was like, let's do this.
Yes, let's get on with language learning.
So it can be a huge, absolutely, it can be a huge motivation boost to somehow complement your studies with like on-the-ground experience or experience with native speakers or speakers of the language outside of the classroom.
All right, and someone, let's say, because you're both now very experienced, and let's say someone who is, I mean, you're even working on your own resources, and let's say someone who might have learned another language in school and might be able to speak that language, and now is like kind of interested in how do I do that independently? What are your approaches independently? How did you start, and what are your recommendations for someone who would like to learn the language independently?
For me, one thing that was helpful was just getting a basic knowledge of the language first. So So a lot of people like to have their favorites. For example, I know some of the favorites are living language from the United States, Asimov, which is very popular in Europe, and there's a few others. But at the end of the day, they're all going to teach you the same vocabulary. It's how you end up using it that really makes the difference. So whether you get living language or Asimov, the key is to take that and then use it over and over and over again until it sticks in your brain. That's the approach that I use.
Yeah, that's true. I think consistency and focus is a very good point. I would say for me the number one point is motivation. So first, I mean, the motivation to learn the language needs to come from yourself, basically. It's, I mean, for example, to me, my interest in Japanese came from like Japanese pop culture, anime, video games, etc. When I was younger. But yeah, the point that you made about sticking to one resource and really like using it at 100% of its utilization rate is a very good point, because I mean, to each his own, right? So perhaps for some people Asimil is not going to be the right resource, and they're going to like another kind of textbook or another way to learn languages. If you're more auditive learner or visual learner as well, can make also a big difference. But for me, for example, I really like Asimil to learn. I think I learned 4 languages with Asimil, or at least I got started with 4 languages using Asimil. And yeah, so stick to it, try to stick to the program, and yeah, usually if you're really motivated, if you have the motivation and the focus, you're going to be more or less successful.
Yes.
And if you can, of course, complement your language learning process with interaction with natives or with people, other learners, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
You live in New York, but how do you, I mean, in New York it's maybe easy to practice, but how can people in general practice their languages?
Well, the one thing that I find that I'm really fortunate, lucky to be in New York for, is that there's a lot of diversity within our local community. So I go down to ethnic eateries a lot, and there will be immigrants fresh off the boat from wherever they came from. A few months ago, I went with my aunt to a little place called Mi Casita, my little house, and there were Cuban immigrants who had just gotten there a few years ago, and they were already up and starting this business, and it was delicious food. It was fantastic, very low price. But what was even more worth it for me was being able to talk with them, talk about their history and their culture, where they came from, why they came here, and that was, that's how I get my practice. In terms of Spanish and Italian, French I have to go a little bit more to Skype and things like that.
Okay.
Because if there aren't many people in my area that speak it, I'm a little hard pressed, I guess you could say.
Okay. All right.
To find people.
Okay.
And how do you do that? Because you don't live in New York.
Yeah, no, I do live in Germany, but I live in Munich, which is a rather big city. So we do have quite a few people from various countries all around the world.
And how do people then react if you approach them? So you go to the neighborhood where they speak Spanish or Chinese or any other language. How do they react if you tell them, hey, I'd like to practice your language?
I mean, usually I have in my personal experience, I have a bit of a less organic use of language, so I attend a lot of language meetups or language exchange events, and over there, I mean, people expect you to be able to speak like multiple languages, or I don't know, or at least being interested in their language. So they won't be necessarily surprised, but you always see somehow happiness in their eyes that when you somehow manage to speak their language at a certain level, or if you show a certain degree of interest.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's always very, very gratifying. Very. Yeah.
Yeah. The funniest part I find is sometimes I'll start talking with somebody in their native language and they'll be shocked, and then at least for me, then they'll switch back into English. Oh, you speak very good Spanish. I'm like, no, I want to stay in Spanish. Continue talking with me in Spanish.
Yeah,
tell me more about you in your native language. I love Nelson Mandela's quote, if you speak to a man, language a man knows, that goes to his head. If you speak the language that the man spoke his native language, that goes to his heart.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously that's a very brief paraphrase.
Yeah.
But I think it's true.
Absolutely,
I think it's true. Connecting with people is one of the best things that we can do as language learners.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very interesting. And do you have any future it the languages that you're currently learning, you first want to like get them to a higher level?
Right now, my project is Esperanto. It's not very good right now. I've been learning only for a few weeks with my aunt. We decided as a challenge for Lang Festival, let's see how much Esperanto we can learn before the conference. Albeit it's not very good, but my main challenge after Lang Fest will be to get that level up. And then after that, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I might even look to like an Eastern language, try to brush up my Chinese a little bit, or I might want to dive into something new, maybe Russian, Polish, dive into my family's history even further, further than Italian.
Interesting. And you, Emmanuel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, okay, between 2012 and 2017, I was learning like one new language per year. So I moved like from 4 languages to 10 languages. But the problem is, once you reach a certain threshold, so to speak, it's either you learn more languages and you start becoming a language dabbler, or you focus on what you already know and then try to improve your level in all these languages. And I decided to go for the second route, so to improve the languages I already know and
quality over
a little
quantity.
bit more. Yeah.
Quality over quantity.
I mean, some people like to dabble in many languages. I also respect that, but the path I want to follow is a little bit like more focusing on the language I already know, in particular East Asian languages. So actually, I've made a big decision a few months ago. I decided to quit my job at the end of the year and to move to Taiwan for 6 months and to Korea for 6 months to really focus on Mandarin and Korean. And after that, I would like to move to Japan and hopefully find a job and maybe even settle down there. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
And language events such as the Lang Fest here. So,
Yes.
For you, is it the first time for both of you, or?
It's my first Lang Fest ever, yeah.
It's my first Lang Fest, but I've had experiences at other polyglots events like the Polyglot Gathering and the Polyglot Conference. So I guess they're a bit similar. You find the same type of people here.
And
Yeah.
isn't that also something that you'd say, like, this is something that I want to share my knowledge, but also I want to get inspired by others?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a whole atmosphere in this community that kind of really motivates you to go a bit further with your language learning and to start new projects or to get a bit deeper with farther with all the projects that you've started.
Because everybody that's here brings so many stories and so many strategies and so many new perspectives that you haven't really thought of before. For example, when I met Emmanuel just about an hour ago, it was just fascinating because I'm from New York. Not many people speak foreign languages there, and I meet Emmanuel, who's in Paris, France, and can travel anywhere in Europe in a few hours.
That is true.
So it's just amazing meeting people like
that.
And just being able to connect with them, that just, like you said, inspires you further, to continue your language progress.
All right,
Definitely.
That's very interesting. So we have basically someone from the US, someone from France.
Yes.
Both of you are very international, speaking different languages. What is maybe your common advice, or also different advice if you want, but to people who are interested in language learning and who would like to go or to follow your steps, let's say, and do it independently out of the classroom as well, outside of the classroom?
Well, my biggest piece of advice actually comes from tennis. I'm a big tennis player. I love tennis. I was watching Rogers Cup here a few weeks ago, but my coach told me, he pulled me aside. He says, James, when you begin playing tennis, 75% of your time should be practice and 25% should be match play. So the analogy I use is that 75% of the time when you're a beginner should be getting to know your vocabulary, getting your vocabulary down, just memorizing verbs. I'm just going to use Spanish. Ada, ir. Learn how to use those. Learn how to use those effectively, how they're conjugated, and then 25% of the time, you should be speaking the language. As your level improves, however, once you get to the B1, B2 level, the one thing that I find really helpful is to flip that. 75% of your time should then be speaking with people, diving into the topics that you don't really know about, so you can acquire new vocabulary.
Yeah.
And then only 25% of the time should be spent on actual practice by yourself, because you can only learn so much by yourself in a classroom.
That's true.
Or on an online app, or with anything like that.
Very interesting. Emmanuel, what's
Yeah,
your
that's true.
advice?
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I mean, when you start learning a language, it's my personal opinion. It's that it's good to have solid knowledge in the grammar of the language that you want to learn. But at the same time, you know, you can do this step by step. So first learn the basics, like the present tense, for example, and then start making simple sentences. And yeah, don't be afraid to start speaking. Like even from a beginner level, even if you make mistakes, you can just attend like that's what I did for Italian and Spanish. So I attended like Italian and Spanish language exchange events. At the beginning, I couldn't speak a word, but I basically threw myself into cold water, as you say. And yeah, that's how I somehow step by step learned. And yeah, then you can go back to grammar. I think this ratio of 75%, 25% is really good when you're a beginner. And yeah, when you reach like the intermediate level, then you need to kind of broaden your scope of interest and of practice, like the topics that you're gonna talk about and that you're gonna learn about.
Exactly.
And you can only do that by speaking to various kind of people, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, always to be open as well for changes and to
Yeah.
always follow the same strategy, but to also adapt somehow to your level.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
It's
right.
it's necessary to mix it up, you know, when you're doing language, especially when you get to that intermediate plateau. That's one of the biggest challenges that all language learners face. I've overcome the intermediate plateau. Emmanuel's overcome the intermediate plateau. And it's very difficult, you know, coming from somebody that's done it. But you can do it. It's possible.
Yeah.
You know, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to add something to that. I mean, one good strategy to overcome this intermediate plateau is to go to the country where the language is spoken. I know that not everybody can afford that or can, because of time or financial issues, but if you have the chance to do it, do it. But, yeah, speaking of going to the country, a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to go to the country and the language will be absorbed into me and I won't need to make any effort. No. There's always a certain amount of preparation before you do that. So I guess, maybe try to reach perhaps A2, B1 before that, you know, have solid grammar knowledge. Like a solid foundation in the grammar. Start speaking a little bit, and then when you get to the country, you know, you're familiar with the structure of the language, then you're actually going to learn and be able to overcome this intermediate plateau.
Perfect. Well, I think you motivated many people.
Yeah.
Advice about language learning. Thank you very much to both of you. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks.
And,
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci à toi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.